Hey, what is up guys? Murgaman4 here, and welcome back to part 2 of my pre-Series 11 thoughts. The last video I discussed some of the behind-the-scenes aspects about the writers, the new composer, and the main cast. This time I'm going to be focusing more on plot-based stuff and all of the marketing for the series, and just discussing how I think I'm going to enjoy the series based off of what I've seen of that so far. So, I guess the easiest thing to talk about first is the trailers. We did have to wait quite a while for our first trailer. Now, we did get a couple of teasers, which, admittedly, I like especially film teasers, but admittedly the ones for this series have been a little bit poor. It was, the first teaser wasn't really much of anything. It wasn't specified that it was going to be a specially filmed teaser. It was called a trailer. So I think pretty much all around it was a big disappointment to people, mainly because it wasn't what they were anticipating. But it didn't really have much of anything in it. It just showed the main cast doing mundane, everyday stuff, and then the 13th Doctor showed up. That was it. Nothing. Just no hints as to what the series might be, no hints as to what it might contain, just nothing. So that was quite bland and unfortunate. I don't really have much else to comment on that. But at Comic-Con in July, we did get our first proper trailer for Doctor Who Series 11. I know a lot of people complained about this one for not featuring any of the monsters or villains. I didn't mind that. I thought as a first trailer it was pretty decent. We got to see general new look of this series, and actually something I want to comment on. They are going for a significant new look. They're changing the kinds of cameras that they're using. It's a new aspect ratio from before, which would be the first time the aspect ratio changed, I think, since they upgraded to HD in 2009. And it definitely looks really, really gorgeous. We didn't really learn much from the first trailer. We just got our first glimpses at some of the episodes. Still mostly more general, generic shots, but we did get some dialogue at last, giving us a bit of a sense as to the kind of mood and tone we can expect. And I enjoyed it. I thought for a first trailer it was pretty good. Got me interested, got me excited. And it wasn't too late for a trailer because I know people were saying, oh, when's the trailer coming? This is so long. But really, our last couple series to air in the autumn, Series 9 and Series 8, they both had their trailers come out in about mid-July, and then this one came out late July. And it's airing a few weeks later, too. Over a month later than Series 8 aired, and a couple weeks later than Series 9 aired. So really, it wasn't that late for a first trailer. Later in August, I think, we got a second specially filmed trailer. It's the release date trailer. But this one basically had a heavy-handed breaking the glass ceiling metaphor, because that's what the 13th Doctor did, broke the glass ceiling, and had some really bad pop music. A lot of people didn't like it, even the people who are generally more positive. I don't think the pop music and Doctor Who mix. I mean, it just makes it feel like a fan tribute, not like an actual official thing. I much prefer just regular like trailer music, you know? Music that doesn't have vocals in it. I feel like it fits more. And it just feels less cheesy. So I wasn't a huge fan of that release date trailer because it, I don't know, didn't really do much for me. It didn't make me feel anything. And I didn't like the song. Then we got our second trailer a little over a week ago, and this was a good trailer. I like this trailer. Even more so than the first trailer, the show is looking stunning. Visually wise, I think just from the trailer I can have a pretty good guess. This is the best the show has ever looked. It just looks gorgeous. And man, whatever they're changing behind the scenes, at least in terms of visually, they made some good choices, because it's looking good. We got a bit more meat in this trailer as well, because we got to see some glimpses at some of the enemies, and unfortunately, as was confirmed by Chibnall, we do not have any returning enemies this series. There was a villain that was seen while filming that many people speculated to be the Jadoon or the Sontarans. I was hoping for the Sontarans because we really, really need a good Sontaran story because we haven't had a proper one for 10 years. But no. You see, in the trailer, it's clear to see they're not Sontarans. They're a completely different thing. And actually, I'm going to talk about that right now, about no returning villains. That includes the Daleks and the Cybermen. The Daleks have appeared in some form in every series of the revival. Not every series has had a Dalek-focused episode. Series 6 and Series 10 only had cameos from the Daleks. But this is the first time where it's confirmed that, like, no Daleks at all. So maybe we can finally get rid of that dumb rumor that they're forced to use the Daleks every season. Because correlation doesn't equal causation. I, for one, am glad that the Daleks are having a break. I think they're way too overused, especially in the Moffat era with all their cameos, because I felt that the cameos just cheapened them and just made them feel so much less threatening. And how much more terrifying are the Daleks when they've been brought back after such a long time? When you have a break from them, it actually feels like an event when they come back. But at this point, you expect to see them every series. So instead of being excited to see the Daleks again, you just roll your eyes and you're like, oh, well, of course they're in it. So this is a really refreshing change to be able to have. Additionally, I think that even if, that contract doesn't actually exist, they still have used the Daleks more times than they should have, in that it felt like they were using the Daleks for the sake of using the Daleks, instead of because they had a good Dalek story to tell, which is not the right thing to do, in my opinion. I have the same kind of feelings about returning characters as well. You bring them back when you have a good story to tell with them. You write a story that will fit the Daleks, not write the Daleks to fit into a story. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope it does. But basically what I'm trying to say is, you gotta have an idea first. You can't just say Daleks and go from there. So hopefully this means that Chibnall is going to be doing more of that. And I do think once they return, whether it be in Series 12 or even later, they'll have that much more impact. And Chibnall has confirmed that they're not gone forever, implying that at some point he will definitely bring back the Daleks. Additionally, though, we're not just missing the Daleks, we're missing any returning villain whatsoever, which is somewhat disappointing for me. I always love to be able to see how New Who reimagines older villains and monsters. We haven't properly had that happen since the Zygons in the Day of the Doctor, and that was 5 years ago now. So I'm a little disappointed to see that we're still not getting any more. Of course, unless you include the Mavellan's brief cameo in the pilot, or the Mondasian Cybermen as separate from just Cybermen in general, I personally don't. So I'm a little disappointed on that front. There are definitely a few I'd like to see come back. I've always wanted the Celestial Toymaker to come back, even if that's not particularly a likely thing. The Krynoids I think would be interesting. I'd love to see some other Time Lords from the classic series, like the Meddling Monk. We can see other Time Lords than just the Master. We know that all the Time Lords are alive, so we could totally do that. However, as much as I'm disappointed that we aren't having any returning villains, at the same time, this means that we can focus on new threats and potentially even creating new recurring villains, which is also something I've been wanting. I feel like the new series has lacked this. Other than the Weeping Angels, the Silence, maybe the Ood, most of the New Who villains have had one, at most two appearances, and then that's it. We don't have any New Who equivalent to the Daleks, or the Cybermen, or the Master, and I feel like we need one. And I'm hoping that in doing this, Chibnall will be able to create a new recurring villain, at least for 13's era, but maybe even beyond that. And I think that would be great, because I think that New Who needs its own recurring villains as well. And I also think this is a smart choice, because it's also going to be able to show that this era doesn't need the past to hold it up, that it can stand up on its own. Which I also think is really important, especially when you have such a big change as the first female Doctor that a lot of people, unfortunately, are pushing actively against. So on the whole, besides a little bit of disappointment, I think that this is actually a pretty good decision. Another thing that we're apparently not getting this series that we've had in every other series of New Who is an overall story arc for the season. Now, we've known for a while now, maybe a few months, that the 10 episodes of Series 11 are each going to be standalone. We're not going to get any two-parters, which is unfortunate, because I always like multi-part stories. I love the cliffhangers, and I know that it doesn't necessarily mean that we won't have cliffhangers, but I highly expect that we won't, because, of course, you know, these stories, their plots won't interlink, and the way that Chibnall's been talking about it, and especially with more recent news that there isn't really a series arc besides the character development in the season, I don't think there's any room for a cliffhanger, because yes, you can have cliffhangers that are, you know, not necessarily part of the single story. For example, you might have an episode that leads directly into a finale, but again, when we don't have a series arc, there's not really much that you can have in the way of cliffhangers. And even then, I usually do prefer the more classic style cliffhanger of there being immediate threat, or, you know, something in the plot left unresolved of that particular episode in that particular situation, rather than some sort of revelatory cliffhanger. I usually prefer the other kind. So I am disappointed at, you know, the loss of that, because I love multi-part stories. And it'll be interesting to see how they handle not having a series arc. I've, for the most part, enjoyed the series arcs in New Who. Sometimes I do think they're a bit clumsily handled. And I would have been curious to see how Chibnall would handle one. But this time around, I mean, I don't think it's an inherently bad thing to not have an overall season arc. Classic Who pretty much never did it. My only real thing is, probably means that the finale won't really be an event, which I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. In the modern age, at least, I feel like finales should have some sort of huge impact. They should be an event, a culmination of the past series, but without some sort of arc connecting the episodes, I don't really see how that can happen. As of this moment, it just seems like the finale is going to not be really any different than any other episode. The only real thing that it could be built up to is where the characters are going to be at the end of the season. But plot-wise, we're not really going to get any major wrap-ups or any satisfying conclusion to an overall story, because there's not going to be an overall story. But at the same time, I think that it could be good to see how Chibnall handles that, and how New Who does a season without an arc. But I mean, I think it could turn out really well if you just have all these individual adventures that don't really connect to each other. Just focus on the adventuring, don't necessarily focus on an overall story. I think that definitely has potential to turn out quite well. Now, plot-wise, we don't actually know a lot about the episodes. Chibnall has been pretty tight on secrets and spoilers. Sometimes people have thought maybe a little too much so. And I would somewhat agree with that. But at the same time, if it means a better experience overall, then I'm all for it, because they've definitely spoiled too much before in the past. And I don't know if they necessarily have to rein it in as much as they've done, but they definitely needed to rein it in more. So it's going to be very refreshing to be able to go into a series without so much prior knowledge. Of course, we didn't know the air date for this season until a little over a month ago. We only got our second trailer like a week ago, 2 weeks before the premiere. We haven't even had a specific trailer for episode 1, which I believe they've usually done before. And at least during the latter Moffat era, they always released a bunch of promotional pictures a week before the episode aired. We don't really have any promotional pictures from the premiere. So it's definitely going to be an interesting one. But I'm excited to be able to go in more fresh and with less knowledge, and be able to be more surprised and have more twists and turns happen. And I'm really looking forward to having the rug pulled out from under me at some point in the series, or whether that happens multiple times. But otherwise, because we don't really know much of any of the episodes, there's not too much to talk about. We know that episode 1 is set in contemporary Earth in Sheffield, and that's probably the episode we know the most about. We've seen a decent amount of clips from it in trailers, and it seems to be, from the pre-air reviews, pretty bog-standard Doctor Who episode. We've got a monster, and introduce new companions and new Doctor, and yeah, it doesn't sound like anything too crazy. Episode 2, I believe they're going to some sort of alien planet. Beyond that, I don't really know much. There's an episode that's going to deal with Rosa Parks. However, I don't know how much of the plot is going to revolve around that. I'm hoping maybe we can get a pure historical and generate conflicts through a non-alien mean, because I really enjoyed most of the historicals from the classic series, and I'd love to see a modern take on it. I think there's an episode that's based around the Salem witch trials, which would definitely be an interesting episode with the Doctor being a woman, and that's for sure an interesting period to explore. There's an episode with a giant spider, and I recall seeing some promotional pictures of a pregnant man that were leaked. Not official promotional pictures, they were leaked. And we get a glimpse of him in the trailer. So I have no idea what's going on there. That's very curious. But otherwise, yeah, plot details, nil. But from what we've seen, it looks like we've got a pretty good variety, which is great, because I love variety. I just hope there's not too many episodes set on contemporary Earth, especially when we only have 10 episodes now down from 12, because I love to see, I know they don't have the biggest budget in the world, but I love to see alien planets, and I love to see different times, and that's, I feel like New Who in the past has had too many contemporary episodes, so I'd love to see a step back from that kind of thing. This season we've also got a new sonic screwdriver and a new TARDIS, which I haven't really talked about. The new sonic screwdriver I'm not the biggest fan of, not because it looks like a dildo, because every sonic screwdriver looks like one of those. And everyone makes comments about it, and no, this doesn't look any more like it than any other sonic screwdriver, so no, that's not my issue. I'm not as big of a fan of it because it just doesn't look as technologically advanced, I guess. It does look more organic and thrown together, which I know some people like the style of that. I personally don't. I prefer the sonic screwdriver when it looks more technological. And that's basically about it. I'm just not enthralled by this design. It's not terrible. I guess it's fine. But, yeah, I'm pretty indifferent to it, honestly, overall. Now, the new TARDIS is definitely interesting. I love the exterior of it. It is a fabulous exterior. It looks pretty much just like a modernized version of the classic series exterior for most of the classic run, which is awesome. It looks great. The inside, yeah. Now, it hasn't been officially shown, but a couple months ago there was a leaked image of the TARDIS interior, and I'm not the biggest fan of it. Obviously, it's going to look better in the show, but I don't know. I don't like the giant crystal-looking pillars. It looks fake, like really plasticky. And I hope it looks less plasticky on screen. I'm sure it will. But when I first saw the picture, granted it was on my phone, but when I first saw the picture, I genuinely thought it was a toy and not an actual set because it looked that plasticky. And I don't know about the color scheme either. It's pretty dark, which I'm not the greatest fan of. It's got a lot of blacks in it, and then it's also got some other color to it. I don't know. I'm also just not very enthralled by it. And the crystalline things, again, look less technological. And the 11th and 12th Doctor's interior, that was my favorite interior, particularly because of how technological it looks. It just looks amazing. I don't know how else to describe it. I love how technological it looks. So it's a little disappointing to see that change, but it's also, in another way, good to see something pretty drastically different. That doesn't necessarily equate to good, but we'll see how it looks on screen, and I won't make a final judgment on it until I can actually see it, which we might not actually see the interior until episode 2. It's been rumored that the TARDIS doesn't appear at all in episode 1, which, that's not too big of a deal, because, well, there have been rumors that it won't appear in the season at all, which is ridiculous, because A, it's been in a bunch of the promotional pictures, B, there's been a leak of the interior. C, we've seen the TARDIS in exterior filming. D, we know for a fact that they go to alien planets and other times this season. So how do they get there without the TARDIS? So maybe it doesn't appear in episode 1. That's not the biggest deal in the world because there are other episodes that the TARDIS hasn't appeared in at all. A lot of the third Doctor's run it didn't appear. I mean, that does make it inherently bad, but I do definitely, you know, prefer when we're exploring time and space, but it wouldn't kill the show if the TARDIS was gone for a little while, but I don't think it's going to be gone for long. I definitely think we'll see it in episode 2 for sure, if not episode 1. But, yeah, I don't really think I have too many other things to say. The last trailer got me pretty hyped. I will admit I'm not as hyped for this series as I have been for past series. Maybe it's just because I do have some, I guess, concerns about all these changes and how they're going to play out. I wasn't completely enthralled by Chris Chibnall or Jodie Whittaker right from the beginning. I'm not completely enthralled by some of the design choices or by the pop music in the trailers. There are just certain elements of it that haven't immediately grabbed me, but that's not to say they won't grab me once I get to see them in action. And we're just a week away from seeing that, so I'm very excited to see how this is all going. I definitely think the series is going to be a success. I may not be the most excited in the world for it, but I'm still excited, and I definitely don't think it's going to be a failure unless they do something very, very wrong. But all we have to do is wait and see. One more week until it begins, and we'll be able to get our first glimpse at Chibnall and Whittaker's era on Doctor Who. So these are my pre-Series 11 thoughts and opinions. Please put your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. And yeah, I guess I'll see you guys later after Series 11 starts.